Hi guys, this is Eliot Shapleigh. I'm in Austin, Texas, and the Tele Town Hall meeting is connecting you to us here. It's dialing about 40,000 numbers in El Paso, so you'll be connected as more and more people get on. There's about 300 people on the phone call now. Last time we had 11,000 people on the phone call, so we're real excited to have you join us today here in Austin. And we are going to talk about the remaining 25 days of the session and the most important bills that are kind of moving through here that will impact El Paso, and that's what we want to talk about. So you'll get a chance to talk to us if you will. If you want to ask a question or make a comment at any time, just press the 0 key on your phone pad, and all of a sudden that'll show up to me here in Austin, and then I can get you on the phone. Okay, so let's get going on what these bills are, because I think it's real important to track the bills and see the ideas and understand what's happening here in Austin. The most important bill that we set at the beginning of the session was Tier 1. And the idea was that a university in El Paso, Texas, or really any town in Texas could become a Tier 1, which is a national research university with the right incentives. And there's a bill by Senator Zaffarini that we co-authored along with others that would create the mechanism and the funding to create Tier 1 in the state of Texas. Now, why is that so important? Because without it, UTEP cannot be the university that it can be. And Tier 1 has implications for job creation, has implications for research, has implications for really putting our community on the map. And so this Tier 1 concept is something I hope that you've been paying attention to, because it's so important to the future of El Paso. The next thing I want to visit a little bit about, and hopefully we'll get some of you to call in, is physician shortages and nursing shortages in El Paso. We're going to have 67,000 troops and dependents come to El Paso in the next 4 years. Fort Bliss is the winner under BRAC, and Fort Bliss is going to bring in thousands of new troops. And guess what? We're going to need new doctors and new nurses, and so we'll spend a lot of time down here getting us ready to attract the kinds of physicians and nurses that we're going to need to grow into the future, so that the needs of Fort Bliss don't cannibalize the existing healthcare system in El Paso. So I hope that folks are watching these bills on physician shortages and nursing shortages in El Paso, because they're just real important to what we have to do in the future. The next bill, and I'm going to ask a senator who's here with me, Wendy Davis of Fort Worth, who's dynamite, one of the best new senators in a long time here in Texas, to talk about transportation, because really, if you don't have a good transportation system, if you don't have good mass transit, if you can't get people to work and products to market, then you're not going to go forward as an economy. And we have a $1 billion transportation program in El Paso ready to launch, but if we don't have the money, we're not going to get it paid for. So we worked real hard on a bill called Senate Bill 855, which is real important in North Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth area, also the San Antonio, Austin area, that we joined in on because we want to be able to fund the kind of highway and, more importantly, the mass transit programs that will get people to work. What's going to happen in the future is that increasingly people are going to have choices between moving by mode. And so if they choose to go on a bus, smart rapid transit, or choose to go on commuter rail like you see in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, these municipal regions are going to need the ability to fund these projects. And it's really important in El Paso because we have bridges, we have connections into Mexico, and we've got a whole lot of port issues, having been an inland port for all these years. So I hope you're joining me and thinking about transportation issues, because Senate Bill 855 is real important. The next bill I want to talk about is CHIP. We have an opportunity to drastically expand the number of kids in CHIP, to add to the CHIP program, to get these kids paid for, to have families that can afford to pay for CHIP, all the way up to $66,000 of family income a year. And what that means is that a family with a small copay can buy health insurance, join the CHIP program, and get their kids covered by CHIP, and not have to go to an emergency room to get basic health coverage. So that's another bill that I want to visit with you on as soon as we get a chance to talk. And as we go forward, we'll talk about some of these other bills, but there's one other one that I want to highlight because it came through the Senate last week, and that's this bill on trans fat. You know, as we look into the future and more kids are obese. You look in the second and third grades, and you've got kids that are weighing 140, 150 pounds. What kids are headed to, what we're headed to, is less quality of life and higher public health care costs if we don't figure out what to do about these issues of obesity and this epidemic that's sweeping across America. So we took one small step in the Senate to ban trans fat. Trans fat's an oil that restaurants have traditionally cooked food in. Many of the fast food chains got rid of it about 4 years ago, but now it's time to take the step to bring it to the mom and pop restaurants like we have across our great community, so that we have much healthier oils, so that we have much better quality of life. So we've got now about 2,000 people joining us on this telephone call. And what I'd like to do is get to some of our friends on that want to talk to us. Let's do this. If you want to visit with us, press 0 on your phone pad, the 0 key on your phone pad, and that will put you up on our screen here in Austin, and then we can join you on the phone back in El Paso and visit with you on some of these issues that are so important to you. So let's talk to Nancy Skidmore on the west side of El Paso about the state schools. Nancy, are you there?
Yes. Hi, Eliot.
Hey, Nancy, how you doing?
God, I've been trying to get hold of you for 2 months. You know, we have our oldest son is in the Austin State School.
Uh-huh.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you well.
Did you hear what I said?
Yes, ma'am.
Eliot, I have COPD, so I'm having a hard time breathing. I'm sorry. Anyway, our oldest son is in the Austin State School and has been since he was 12 years old. Now, I got all of these notices from the school saying that it was being discussed about closing the state schools. What do you know about that?
Well, let's share with our audience what the subject is. There are about 13 schools for the mentally disabled across the state of Texas. And Austin has one, El Paso has one, Denton has a large one, Richmond has one. And the idea has been, how do we improve care at those schools? And how do we create community settings where some of these Texans that don't need to be in state schools can actually be back home in the community in a much more independent setting? And so the idea is to create a process now where we look at how many folks actually need to be in these very high-quality state schools. We need to put more money in them, frankly. We haven't done that over the last few years. And then how do we create a place in the community where a Texan can have an independent life, maybe even get a job, but has the ability to be supported back home. So that bill came to the Senate last week, and we spent a lot of time working on that bill. And I'm pleased to say that there's money in the budget to improve these state schools around the state of Texas. So, Nancy, I think you're going to be real happy with what we're doing down here on these state schools.
Good. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, you know, the thought of ever moving him, he's like 56, and he's been there since he was 12 years old. So, you know, that's his home. So I'm so happy to hear that, Eliot. And the council, what am I trying to say? It's not the student council, but the families, you know, that belong to the council, were very upset over this and had meetings and everything. So I'm sure you all will do the best you can. And we're so proud of you.
Well, I'm pretty proud of you. We're going to make sure that these schools are not closed. Good. And we're going to make sure that there's a quality setting, especially for health care. A lot of these Texans have health care issues, as you know, Nancy, from coming down here all these years. But increasingly, we need to find a way to make life independent for more of these Texans, which means creating these slots back home in the community. And there's a whole host of these individuals that can really thrive if we'll do more to create these slots. So I'm very confident that we'll pass this bill this session, and we've been working with the state schools and especially the parents like yourself that have such an interest in this issue. So I hope you'll follow it.
Oh, yeah, oh, yes, I sure will. And as I said, I've only tried to get hold of you 2 months. So I'm so happy you called. And keep up the good
you're getting
work.
a hold of me here, but, you can catch me on my website anytime you need to, or just call the office. For all of you that are on the phone, it's 1-800-544-1990. Or if you need to email me, just look it up on www.shapleigh.org, and you can get to the office and ask us a question anytime.
Okay, I will do that, and I thank you again so very much. And keep up the good work.
Well, I appreciate you, and you keep up the good work.
Well, I don't know what work I'm doing, but I'm trying. Okay, Eliot, talk to you later. Maybe I'll see you at dinner.
Thank you.
No, Village Inn. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Nancy. Take care. We're going to go now to, let's let everybody know. If you want to ask a question, I urge you to get your question in. Just press 0 on your keypad, and then you'll be on the phone with us, and we can answer your question. I think that's the best way to share your ideas, share your concerns, and see what we're doing here in Austin. The idea now is we've only got 21 days left in session, and so we're talking about these major bills that are coming through that are so important to what folks back in El Paso are thinking about. I want to talk about Senate Bill 11, and I have here a great senator who's been on the committee with me in Transportation and Homeland Security, talking about transnational gangs and the issue of drug cartels and how we can best deal with them in Texas and really beef up DPS, the the Department of Public Safety, to deal with these gangs here in Texas. So I'm going to ask Senator Wendy Davis to get on the phone with you and talk a little bit about this. She's joined us here tonight, and I'm going to ask her to say a few words and maybe share her ideas with you before we take the next question. Wendy, welcome to El Paso.
Thank you so much, Eliot, and hello, El Paso. It's a joy for me to be able to join Senator Shapleigh tonight in talking with you all about the work that we're doing here together in the state Senate. Senate Bill 11 is a very large bill that addresses the problems that we've been hearing from, and most particularly we've been educated by Senator Shapleigh about the impact that transnational gangs and drug cartels have had on the El Paso community. And there are some important provisions in that Senate bill. One of those is that members of a criminal street gang would be made liable for monetary damage that they inflict on a city or a neighborhood, and it would allow civil suits to be brought against them with damages collected by your district or city or county attorneys. It also dramatically raises the cap on penalties that a prosecutor can recover against a person who violates a gang injunction from $10,000 to $100,000. Additionally, persons convicted of a gang offense would have their driver's licenses suspended for a year. A judge would have the discretion to require persons convicted of multiple gang-related offenses to serve consecutive sentences. And where a person over the age of 21 creates an illegal or false ID, that person cannot use the defense of writing not a government document on the ID. The additional thing that the bill does is it expands the criteria under which offenders may be added to the state's gang database to include the use of the Internet to identify oneself as a gang member or to recruit new membership. And it also dramatically increases the penalization for persons in gangs who are recruiting our young persons from our high schools and otherwise in our community into gang programs. And I'm very, very proud to be working on this bill with Senator Shapleigh. We did pass the bill, I believe, unanimously out of the Senate floor, and it is in the House right now awaiting approval there, and I fully expect that it will be passed and land on the governor's desk, hopefully for his signature.
Well, I got to brag on Wendy. She's really a bright light in the Senate. She's from Fort Worth, just got elected, and increasingly these transnational gangs are not at the border. They're coming up the trade corridors. We're finding in places like Phoenix and Atlanta that they are focusing activity to distribute drugs in a region, say Arizona. And so the kinds of violence that we've seen in Juarez, you're seeing in a place like Phoenix, Arizona. And so having every Texas senator join and try and figure out how to respond to these transnational gangs from Fort Worth to Austin, from Houston to San Antonio, is real important, and she's been a dynamite addition to the Senate and really helped us with that. Let's go now to David, who wants to talk about, maybe we could go to maybe Katie first on trans fat and talk about that. Katie, are you with us?
Hello.
Hey,
Hello?
Katie, how you doing?
Fine, Senator Shapleigh. How are you?
Doing great.
I have been thinking a lot about this trans fat bill, and I think it's a wonderful first step. We definitely need to get them out of restaurants and schools and hospitals, but still the food in schools and hospitals is extremely unhealthy. And I'm just wondering, what is the next step after this? Where are we going to go from here?
Well, let's share with everyone on the line what trans fat is. It's an oil that is used to cook in restaurants. And instead of using a healthy oil like safflower or canola, it's an oil that has hydrogen pumped into it that attaches to your arteries and causes, frankly, heart attacks. It's terrible for folks that have diabetes. And so this movement started maybe 4 or 5 years ago in New York and then moved to California. Most of the East Coast cities have already passed this legislation. And the idea is to ban it in restaurants. So the restaurant owners use much more healthy oils like, for example, canola. In El Paso, all the major chains have already gone to healthier oils. And I'm real proud to say a lot of the smaller restaurants have already done it. The L&J in El Paso has been a pioneer to do this. And so this bill would ban it statewide in the state of Texas and start this initiative for healthier cooking. Now let's back up and talk about the rise of obesity in our state and what's at the heart of it. It's an epidemic now. When you look out and 40% of the young folks in our state are overweight, they're facing lives of lower quality of life. They're facing higher health costs. The hospitals are facing costs for hypertension and diabetes when folks get to be 40 and 50. So the question is, what do we do about it as a society? We filed this session 5 bills, and I'm real excited about the bills we filed because I think they're real important to attack these issues by looking across a range of solutions. The solution to obesity is really pretty simple. Emphasize lifelong exercise habits, especially starting in the young ages for kids. And the second is eat better, both learning how to cook better and learning how to eat better, both when you're young and as you go into adulthood. So what we did on the early end is preventative. This trans fat bill will take trans fats out of restaurants. We filed a bill to take trans fats out of school districts. We filed another bill that would, and this is in the House that got passed, that would create partnerships around school districts to get kids outdoors. So spend much more time outdoors, learn lifelong health habits, and use local foods in terms of what they're going to cook with. Another bill that we passed out of the Senate would have farmers markets be able to use Lone Star cards to buy vegetables fresh, so more people could have fresh vegetables and improve their diets that way. So there's a lot of people working on these issues down here, but I think the way to do it is take a range of initiatives and approach it as a community and be really fierce about changing lifelong habits, because if we don't do it now, you're looking at young men and women that weigh 300 pounds when they graduate from high school, and they have a quality of life ahead of them that's not good. And we as a community have taken dramatic steps in trying to improve the quality of life and reduce both diabetes and obesity. And this bill really was a major deal. It was not easy to pass it off the Senate floor. I didn't expect that we'd get it off the floor the way we did. Now it's in the House, and I'm real hopeful we'll get it passed.
That's great. That's great. But the hydrogenated oils are still in a lot of the foods that we eat if you read the labels. So partially hydrogenated and fully hydrogenated oils. So we still got a ways to go, but I think it's absolutely fabulous that you put that time and thought into it.
Well, I appreciate you for thinking about it and calling us tonight. It's really important that you're a part of the solution, because you're calling tonight, you're participating in democracy and being a part of making this happen. It's not out of the House yet, so if you'd be so kind as to call over to our House members and give them an attaboy, an attagirl, and say, help us get this bill passed because it's really important for El Paso, we'd appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you so much for calling in. Let's call now, if we could, to Enrique. If we could get Enrique on the phone.
Hello, Eliot.
Hey, Enrique. How are you doing? I'm doing great.
A little bit with the flu, but, you know, getting there. I have a couple of questions for you, Eliot. I've been listening a lot of, you know, the cleaning of Asarco, and I even heard, I don't know if this is true, that it's going to be destroyed or removed. And my question one is, wouldn't it be nice to preserve this historical place? It's a very important historical place for El Paso. Number one, you know, maybe a museum and, you know, football or soccer or baseball fields or, you know, things of that nature. My second question is, the upper and lower valleys are being invaded, you know, by the city. Is there a way we could preserve those valleys?
Well, let's start with the Asarco, because I think that's an issue that all El Paso needs to share in the solution. You know, Asarco in the 1880s and in the early part of the 20th century had a role, and it was related to mining and smelting, which was the industry of the West at that time. But now we know that the lead that was being smelted there is in neighborhoods all across El Paso, and we know that this site has created significant pollution and contamination that now needs to be cleaned up. So right now what's in front of us is the cleanup of one of the major industrial sites in all North America. And it's very important that we do that right, and that starts with getting the money. They're in bankruptcy. There was a hearing in El Paso today. I hope that you maybe had the opportunity to listen to it on the radio, that we gave testimony to and advocated for a lot more money to do the cleanup. But it's very important that we clean up the lead that's in place on the west side. There's 75 feet of lead. And if you measured from top to bottom down the over 100 years of lead smelting, there is 75 feet of lead on that site, and there's more than 230 million cubic feet of water in the water table there, right below Asarco. So the immediate concern is making sure that that's cleaned up. I think it would be great if we could keep parts of that site. I'm talking about the tower and some of the buildings that have been they've been icons in El Paso, and make them into a museum or making them into something that would fit with that area. UTEP, without question, will end up growing into that area, and it might be a place for a convention center or a place to actually do a research park that related to Mexico. But right now, the most important thing that we can do is clean up Asarco, and that means getting the money, getting it in both state and federal funding sources, and make sure that we clean that site up. Now, you asked about the valleys.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
You know, the valleys, to me, if you go driving up to Albuquerque, you're in this beautiful ribbon of green, which is the Rio Grande Valley. And you get up to Hatch and you see a beautiful agricultural area that's been cultivated probably since the 800 ADs. That river's been a ribbon of life. It's water in the southwest. And what I'm hopeful that we can do is be much smarter about preserving the green areas of the valleys. In the 1700s, if you went through the El Paso Valley, there were vineyards there. And there were irrigated crops that were growing in the valley that had been there since the early, when the Spaniards came through in the 1500s. And what I'm hopeful that we can do is be much smarter about development of both ends of the valley and leave those green areas so that people can enjoy them. You have vineyards, you have agricultural areas, because someday we're going to need it. One of the bills that we passed this session would be to keep billboards off the old Camino Real, so you don't have billboards going up there to New Mexico, and you preserve the culture, the history, and the legacy of the Camino Real Trail. Those are the kinds of things that we ought to be doing in those ends of the valley.
That's good. That's great. We need to save those valleys.
I agree with you 100%. Enrique, I really appreciate you calling. Let's go, if we can. Let's have everybody, if you'd like to ask a question, please press 0 on your phone pad so that we can take your question. For those of you just joining us, we want to thank you for being a part of our Tele Town Hall meeting. This is kind of a new thing in El Paso. We've got now almost 6,000 people on the phone line with us. We've dialed into 14,000 homes in El Paso, and the idea is that you're connected right straight to your Senate office in Austin, Texas, to share your concerns with us. I want to talk about something that I think is going to be more and more important in El Paso, and that is solar energy and renewable energy, and the idea of people participating in their own energy solutions. So imagine a day you're in El Paso, and you've gotten the money from federal and state tax credits to install solar electricity generators on your roof. And what you're doing is using the power of the sun to generate electricity that is then lowering your bill to your home. What's more is that you're selling your excess electricity so that the factory across the street is participating with your electricity to run their equipment. That day is coming real soon in the state of Texas, and there's not another community that's better positioned than El Paso, Texas. So I really want to brag about solar energy, and some of my colleagues here, Senator Watson from Austin, Texas today, passed a very important bill on the Senate floor that had to do with renewable energy and having Texas take that lead. In the future, we're going to see less and less oil available, and we're going to have to be more independent about our own energy future. So this idea of renewable energy, especially solar from where we are, is so important to our own future, and we're trying to do everything that we can to promote that in El Paso and make sure that our community takes that lead on using solar energy where people can actually lower their electric bills. Let's talk about gangs now if we can. Is Rafaela there? She had called in with respect to
yes, I am. I'm here.
Gangs. So, Rafaela, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Well,
hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I had a comment. First of all, let me congratulate you on all your initiatives, the solar, the Tier 1, all of those things are very important to El Paso. I'm a lifelong El Pasoan, and I think that's great. I have a comment on TransFat, a real quick one, which is that in spite of anything that can be done elsewhere, I think that it starts at the home. As a former school administrator, one of the biggest problems I had was trying to remove snack machines from the hallways because parents complained because they wanted their younger children to have access to the Cheetos and the potato chips and so forth. So I think parents have come a long way in understanding that those things are, over the long term, very harmful. But many of them have still a ways to go before they accept the fact that we have to look at obesity as a serious problem. So having said that, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about gangs because for a long time, El Paso had one of the best gang task forces in the state. I mean, they were top-notch. They worked with the gangs. I don't know if you remember, but there was a time when we had all types of gangs. We had the older veteranos, and then they'd bring in the new ones, and then we had the fatherless, who went from about 13 kids to 1,300, and then all of a sudden the task force was disbanded. I guess maybe the problem had diminished and other things were coming to the fore. And lately, within the last 4 years, we have seen a resurgence of some of the problems that we had pretty much had in control, the gangs, the graffiti. And when you were talking about interstate and intrastate gangs, well, you know, that may be an issue that's coming up. My concern is the fact that we have homegrown gangs here right now that seem to have the upper hand. And anyway, that's my comment, and I'd like to hear what you have to say about that. And then before I let you speak, I just have one big question. Cell phones. You know, California has banned the use of using cell phones and texting and so forth. Boston just had a tremendous accident involving public transportation because the guy was texting his girlfriend. I know we had an initiative about 3 years ago to ban the use of cell phones in vehicles. And it died, I guess, because people don't want to give up their cell phones. Are we going to go anywhere with that? Those are my questions.
Well, I appreciate you calling, and let's talk about your questions and issues on gangs. There are, in my view, two core issues that we're looking at. One is these transnational cartels that are operating on both sides of the border. They're lethal. They are increasingly more powerful. They have been an issue, maybe the most important issue in Mexico in the last 2 years has been what Mexico's going to do about these gangs. And now they've crossed the border, obviously, and they're working with local gangs. Barrio Azteca is one of them in El Paso. And they're working their way up corridors into places like Chicago and New York for distribution. There's a long history here, if you look into it, about what happened with Colombia back in the 80s and 90s, and then Mexican cartels. And the point is that you've got 5 trade corridors in Texas. You've got different gangs for each trade corridor, and what are we going to do about it? We spent a lot of time over the last 2 years having committees come to El Paso, study the issue, and look at what do we do to disrupt these gangs, to target the gang leaders, to target the properties and the assets that they are achieving with their criminal enterprise and forfeiting those assets. And I think we came a long way this session to making the law stronger so that we can take out kingpins, we can jail them in the United States, and we can forfeit these assets and take the assets and, frankly, use them against the criminal enterprise. That bill is Senate Bill 11. A lot of people put in a lot of work. The committee that I'm on came to El Paso twice to look at this issue. So I feel real proud about the work that we did on that. But there's going to be a lot more work that we have to do with the government of Mexico. If we don't strengthen their ability to have an independent federal police force and combat these gangs in places like Juarez and Matamoros and Tijuana, then we're really not going to be successful, because half the problems over there and half the problems in our community. Let's talk about local homegrown gangs. You want to talk about that, and I think that's really a part of our community taking the lead in solving these issues. There are kids that make the wrong choices when they're in the 8th, 9th, 10th grades. We have to encourage these kids to make better choices, and I am a real advocate of what Jaime Esparza and Jose Rodriguez are doing in El Paso, which is to take care of our own issues locally. The worst thing that we can do is to pack up these kids and send them to TYC. My view is that we ought to keep them home. We ought to have ideas like Jose has developed around teen courts, where in the high schools the teens are putting young men and women that have violated norms, and they have put them in front of their peers to ask them, are you making the right choices? The idea of keeping them at home in order to have interventions with the family and strengthen their ability to get into meaningful work and do the kinds of things that make the kids, help the kids make the right choice. One of the things that we've worked on a lot is graffiti, because graffiti to me is kind of where your community is in its evolution. If you have a lot of graffiti in different parts of your community, you got to do something about it. What every graffiti expert will tell you is you got to clean it up. You got to get it off the walls in 24 hours. You got to be very aggressive about it, and you need to get after those that are putting graffiti up. So this session we put into Senate Bill 11 stronger provisions with respect to graffiti and ways to fund graffiti cleanup. And so that's kind of what we've been approaching on these gang issues here in Austin. And I think when you look at it, El Paso's, yes, ma'am.
Well, do you know if the Wiles with the Sheriff's Department and Allen with the Police Department have reinstated a strong task force You know, I agree. TYC, sending all the way to Pyote and all the other places, is not the answer. Teen courts have been successful with those students that are dabbling in gang participation, and more importantly, in parents that are very active in participating with whatever intervention there is with their kids, but that's not the case in all places. And I do believe that strong task forces with an advisory component work very well. And I just don't see that these task forces have been reincorporated and are available to the parents as a double dose. The parents can get help from the schools, but I think the PDs and the Sheriff Department need to be active, too, in providing another source of support. We used to have all kinds of organizations that used to work with these kids through the intercession of the task force, gang task forces that were available, because some kids do not respond well to in-school kinds of settings, and yet they're too young to just be left to their own devices. My question is, do you know if Allen and Wiles have a gang task force in place that has the components that the old gang forces, task forces used to have, of working with kids and building information? If nothing else, the information of who's coming in and how to better cope with the influx of new gangs, including those that are recruiting our kids for cartels.
Well, I know that Sheriff Wiles has made this a huge priority for him. And I know Jose Rodriguez has been working on these gang issues now for nearly a decade. So I know that the two of them have made their priority. And part of that is pulling down the grants and making sure that you have the networks, getting the information, and then having the interventions. You as an educator know that the best thing to do is get right in the middle of it and make sure that you're identifying those that are dabbling, the word that you used I think is a good word, and those that are trending towards serious crime, and then making sure that you have the interventions to get those kids in the kinds of programs that work. El Paso's known around the state for having a really good boot camp program for kids that are getting into gangs and trying to put them on a path to leading a better life. So I feel like we're not maybe where we were a couple of years ago, but you've got people working on it. And Sheriff Wiles is going to be terrific. And I know Jose Rodriguez has been working on this with Jaime Esparza for quite some time. And these bills that we passed are going to make it easier to target what I consider to be the keys, which are the kingpins and forfeiting the properties that they're acquiring with these criminal enterprise funds. So I think we did a good job down here. Well, RICO is a avenue that's in these bills, racketeering charges that can be used to charge not just one person, but a series of people with criminal enterprise, and to get the ill-gotten gains that they've achieved, stash houses, Humvees, the kinds of things that the gangs begin to own. We're going to go after more and more in El Paso and around the state of Texas. So I think we did a pretty good job on that. Let's go, if we can, to let's let everybody know that if you press 0 on your phone pad, you can join us here. So I hope that everyone will do that, is to press 0 so that you can get on and ask your question. I'd like to go now to Valerie or Erica, who has a question about renewable energy.
Hi, Senator Shapleigh. This is Erica. I would like to thank you for all your hard work and your dedication. You've been wonderful. But anyhow, I would like to know, every morning when I go on my way to work, I see all those the huge windmills. I guess they make them in Santa Teresa, and they bring them through El Paso. I don't know where they make them, but I wonder, El Paso is a very windy city. How come we don't have any of those here in El Paso? We have them through Texas. I've seen them from Dallas to El Paso, everywhere, but we're lacking windmills in El Paso?
Well, you ask a wonderful question. I know that our listeners have seen them up in the Wacos. If you go in the Waco Mountains, there's some that are sitting on the hills up there. And if you go further west, you can find them in Fort Stockton. There's 200 or 300 in a wind farm up there. And if you go north to Vaughan, New Mexico, there are literally hundreds of those that are connected to the grid that feed into Albuquerque and parts of Texas. That's a very good question. I think part of the reason was that the cost of setting those things up is very expensive, and until there were production tax credits and different kinds of incentives, utilities looked at those and said, too expensive for what we get out of those windmills in terms of electricity production. Now, really, there's no reason not to invest in those. And we are working with El Paso Electric Company to have a renewable energy big event, an initiative in the fall, to start talking more now that these laws are going to get on the books, both from President Obama and what we're doing down here in Austin, to let folks know what they can do to invest in solar, to put on their homes, to put on their workplaces, to put on the roof either for heating water or generating electricity, how they can sell it back to the electric company, and to try and get schools to design buildings that will be much more energy efficient, and let folks know really what's out there in terms of incentives. So look for it in the fall. There'll be a lot more news coming September, October. But the answer is the El Paso Electric Company did not believe that they could generate enough electricity for the money that they have to spend up front. And now that's changing. So I'm hopeful you'll see a lot more of those windmills around town so that people can see that there's renewable energy using two of the three things that we have more than anyone else. We have solar, wind, and geothermal. Those are things that El Paso has that really other areas don't have. So we're really blessed to have that in our community, and that is a terrific question.
Thank you. And I would also like to add something about the trans fats. I'm a nutrition clerk for EPISD in one school. And yes, we don't have any more fryers, and they've done a great job getting rid of all the trans fats. But my concern is they're filling up those kids with a lot of grains. They have too much grains. And as you know, grains, yes, they're a carbohydrate, but it makes you more propense to diabetes and to obesity. So I think that there's something else we need to tackle there, not just trans fats, but all the grains that are being fed to our kids at schools.
Well, one of the things we did is got to work with one school district to try and roll out kind of a pilot program that would be superb, a really state-of-the-art pilot program. And we picked a smaller school district, and we worked in three areas. The first was to have the school district buy local. How can they buy local fruits and vegetables to improve the nutrition of the kids and serve much fresher servings so that kids got a lot more healthy? The second one was to put a nutrition professional on the staff so that they were designing meals every day that were healthy for the kids so that the school district themselves were not pushing trans fat and other unhealthy products. And the third was to get these kids outdoor and make them get up and see the great environment that we have there in El Paso with the mountain, get over to the river, and even start going to places like Las Cruces where you've got some terrific outdoor parks and stuff. So that program is launched. We're working with Texas Parks and Wildlife. We're working with the National Park Service. I think you're going to hear a lot more about it, but we're trying our best to pilot a program at a smaller district so we can go to the bigger districts and say, look, this works there, why don't you try it? So we're doing our very best to make that happen.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you, and thank you for your questions. If everybody could press 0 on your phone pad and you can ask us a question. If you're just joining us, we really appreciate you taking part in our Tele Town Hall meeting, and we have time for about another 3 questions. So I'm going to go now to Jay Arms, who's calling in. And Jay, thanks for joining us.
Eliot, let me tell you something. I've been working on the kidnappings in Juarez for since last January. We've had about 70 kidnappings, and they've spilled over the El Paso area. I don't know why the authorities are trying to curb that and say it has not spilled over. But it has spilled over, and let me tell you something. I thank you for all your diligence and everything that you've done for us. Every bill that you've passed, passed and they've voted on, I'm really appreciative of it. But I don't know why the authorities are keeping this numb and trying to say that, oh no, the kidnappings and all this has not spoiled over the border, and it has, Eliot.
Well, I've been in a lot of briefings. First of all, Jay, thank you for bringing that question. And I've been in a lot of briefings, as you know, from having been an elected official yourself. You get to hear from all different points of view, and you get some briefings from different authorities about what the real scope and nature of the problem is. And I want to put this in sharp relief for El Pasoans. We're the third safest community in the country. But the fact is that international drug cartels are operating in our community, and they are operating on corridors all the way up to Chicago, Toronto, Calgary, and throughout North America. And the question is, what does the state do? What does the local government do? And then what is the role of the federal government? And down here in Austin, what we've tried to do is to take the DPS, which has frankly been a 1950 crime-fighting unit, and put it into the 21st century. We're trying to improve pay, get much better leadership, put them into drug cartel teams that can operate along corridors, get information from the prison system, where so many of these guys are operating out of the prison system, and then give them the tools to target the assets, to take the assets away from these drug cartels. That, to me, is the most important thing that we can do at the state level. Frankly, DPS has been a failure at helping combat drug cartels. So I'm focused on one area, what we can do in state government, and I think we came a long way from where we were at the beginning of the session. There's more that we can do. In my view, we've got to promote the federal government in being much more aggressive with the Mérida initiative and investing in the government of Mexico to create an independent federal police force that is not corrupt. And frankly, you know, I know that the federal police force and state police force in Mexico has been corrupt. And it's going to take a long time. It's going to take training. And it's going to take the kinds of independent observers that can make this happen. But I feel like there's been strides made under Calderon, and I think we're headed in the right direction.
Let me tell you, Eliot, all the kidnapping, we've had kidnapping since 1 year ago, and we've had 70 kidnappings that we had to abstract the people that had been kidnapped. And the only thing that I hear is they're trying to cover that up from the public so that they won't be panicking and all that stuff. I mean, people have to be informed. People are kidnapped from El Paso and taken over to Juarez and killed, and that's bottom line. And let me tell you, I don't know what that is. Talking about DPS, they are zero. They have not cooperated anything into curbing these kidnappings or assassination attempts and all that. We work international, Eliot, and let me tell you something. I really appreciate all the bills that you have introduced, and from my stand, I always say that you're the answer to all the people's problems, because you're the only one that introduces the bills that people are being affected with, you know. And I say you're the rocket scientist of our community and of our district.
Jay, we're just doing our best. That's all we can do. But the great thing about El Paso, it's on the move now. And people are thinking about things that we can do. And really, when I come down here to Austin and I see young people like Claudia Ordaz, who came down here and is working with me in the Senate and being so terrific, make the choice to move back to El Paso, that is unbelievable that she's making the choice to go back to make her mark in that community. That's what we need, because just 5 years ago, 8 years ago, these young, talented, wonderful El Pasoans were making the choice to stay here in Austin. And so I feel like the best things are happening in El Paso. But it's going to take all of us working together, you, City Council, County Commissioners Court, laying out the kinds of things that we need to do to change the city and being fearless about making it happen. One thing about this Wendy Davis, who's here tonight, Senator from Fort Worth, she is absolutely fearless. We need another 20 senators just like her, and we'd go places down here. But it's happening in El Paso, and that's why I think we're on the move now, is that we've got leaders that will lay out the future. They'll get the people behind them. They'll say, this is where we need to go. And if you've got that, you've got everything. And I really appreciate you calling in. We've got time for 2 more questions. So I'm going to take a call from Richard. Richard's calling in about rail in El Paso. Richard, are you there?
Senator?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, here's my question on the monorail. In 1968, the federal government came to El Paso and offered the city of El Paso to build a monorail from the plaza downtown to the bridge and back. But they said the city would have to come up with $1 million and they would do the rest. The city turned it down, and their reason was they thought it was too expensive. Now, I've heard a little gossip, and even in the newspaper and news, about them wanting to do a monorail again here. What is that? Just gossip, or have they taken any action on it at all?
Well, let's talk about the history of rail in the past, because we've got the richest history in the West when it comes to rail. First railroad came through in El Paso in the 1880s, and really is what put El Paso on the map. Fast forward to the early part of the 1900s. By 1907, El Paso had 35 miles of commuter rail. You could actually take commuter rail down to Isleta, and you could take it over the border. And that commuter rail operated till 1974, when for various reasons it was stopped. In the 1940s, General Motors and Standard Oil bought the commuter rail lines of Albuquerque, El Paso, San Diego, and other cities and stopped them, really to foster the development of cars and highways and sprawl. That's the history of rail in the Southwest. Now we have this incredible opportunity. There is a line that connects El Paso into Juarez. It's about 40 miles of rail. And the plan in the future is to take that line and move the major line, the industrial line, to the west of the Juarez Mountains. What an incredible opportunity to bring back that 42 miles of commuter rail, so you're moving people between El Paso, Juarez, and even Las Cruces on a commuter rail line like you see up in Albuquerque. Albuquerque did it in 3 years. And we had the rail runner in El Paso on Friday so that everybody could see what commuter rail looks like, and had them come down and really kind of show them off, because Bill Richardson did that up in New Mexico in just 3 years. He took an existing rail line, a Class 4 rail, and bought from Bombardier these units and got it going in New Mexico for $2 million a mile. That is an incredible investment. Doing a highway is 4 times as much. And so if you look on our website, you can see a video of the rail runner in El Paso, and really we need to talk about that, because the cities that we compete with, Fort Worth, Dallas, Albuquerque, over on the West Coast, moving to mass transit, lowering the cost of moving people, improving the air, making cities livable is what the future is about. Here in Austin, they've got 35 miles of commuter rail they're about to unveil. They've had some hiccups. They haven't started it easily, but they're about to unveil 35 miles that connects the downtown area with north where their growth is. And so when folks in Austin have a choice, and they pull into a rail station somewhere north of here and come straight down to downtown and don't have to bring their car. Now that's a quality of life issue. It's a money issue because it's less. You don't have to spend money on a car or gasoline. And all of a sudden, it's something that that is the wave of the future that I think people need to look at. So this opportunity is out there, and you're going to hear a lot more from us about how we can make that rail work into Juarez. That's why we brought rail running into El Paso on Friday.
Thank you.
You bet, Richard. Thank you for calling in. We have time for one more question. If we could go to, I think, is Noelle still on the line with us? Noelle was calling in. I'm not sure that she's here. Let's talk to Rosa and talk about predatory lending.
Yes.
Rosa, are you there?
Yes.
How are you?
Thank you for this this wonderful way of communicating. I do want to do something about that predatory lending. I heard you on one of the radio stations this last week, and you said that there's a lot of lobbyists over there in Austin trying to get those, for them to succeed and continue to do what they're doing. But can we do something about it? And I know you're a fighter, so can we get more senators to work on this?
Well, I'm going to put Wendy Davis back on because here's a fighter, boy. She is strong, strong, strong. But let me mention two things, okay? First is we are doing something in El Paso. And we started the Invest in the American Dream initiative last year. And the idea is to create a financial literacy program like nothing else in America. So our students graduate with 10 very, very state-of-the-art skills, knowing about financial literacy, knowing how to balance a checkbook, staying away from credit cards that get you into trouble so quickly, learning how to buy a home without getting into one of these loans that they raise the interest rate on you, learning how to borrow for your business if you need to. So that's one of the things that we're doing in El Paso, and you're going to hear a lot more about that. But what we need to do from El Paso to Fort Worth to Houston, San Antonio, is to build a coalition of strong leaders like yourself for next session, where the churches and AARP and the YWCA and small businesses and school districts get together in a coalition to say, basta. We will not let people be in loans that cost 1,100% a year. Let me get Senator Davis to talk because she's been absolutely dynamite on this issue.
Hello, Rosa. This is Wendy Davis.
Yes,
I'm new to the Texas Senate. Oh, absolutely. Eliot and I last week actually introduced a bill in the Business and Commerce Committee. We introduced several bills that would try to address predatory lending. And what's unfortunate and terribly frustrating is that there's a small number of people who are here in both the Senate and the House in the state of Texas who are not at all interested in doing something about this problem. And it goes directly to what Eliot had said about the power of the lobby influence here. What I've learned as a new senator is that sometimes our process here at the state of Texas can be anything but democratic because, unfortunately, even though I believe we have a vast majority of senators and House members who want to do something about this issue, when issues are assigned to particular committees, sometimes those committees and the committee chairs can have a great deal of power in terms of the legislation that moves forward to the Senate floor so that a full and open conversation and debate can be had. But I'm not willing to give up on it simply because we haven't had the success that we hope to have this session. What we know is that there are a great number of people in our communities all over the state of Texas who are very desperate, and their desperation, unfortunately, is being preyed upon by these lenders who, in the state of Texas, operate with absolutely no oversight. I was shocked when I came here and learned more about the law to find that while every other financial institution is governed, whether it's a pawn shop or a bank or a credit union, predatory lenders, these payday lenders, are under absolutely no oversight whatsoever. And all I can assure you, Rosa, is that it's a very important issue for me. I represent the Fort Worth community and Arlington and other cities in Tarrant County, and I see the way people in the communities I represent are preyed upon by these institutions, and I will commit to you, and I know that Eliot is very, very committed and has been for a number of years on this issue, that we aren't going to stop until we do something about it. And if people like you make sure and to continue to voice your concern to other representatives besides ourselves, I think that will be very, very helpful, and your voice can be very powerful in that regard, and we appreciate so much you calling.
Excuse me. I like to do that because I think East Texas, we need to get some of those people out of the office and get new people that are willing to work for the public, and especially the young couples that are getting into buying houses and they really don't know what they're getting into.
Well, we're going to redouble our efforts. We're going to try and, of course, make our community the very best financial literacy community in the country, and try and build a coalition here that can make that change happen. I'm going to commit to talking to the bishops around the state of Texas. They need to be leading this effort. AARP, as we talked about, the credit counseling agencies, all the YWCAs, the YMCAs around the state, help people, and they should be part of this to make this happen. So we're going to do that, but you can bet that we'll keep coming with and never, never, ever give up. And I appreciate your call, because putting a focus on this issue, participating in democracy like you are, makes us stronger. And so you being a part of this call has already made a difference, and I want to congratulate you and thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Senator.
You bet. We are going to have to go. We've got committee hearings still going on here in Austin, but I want to apologize for anyone who may have been waiting in the queue, didn't get a chance to speak. We had a total of 11,000 folks joining us tonight. We left phone calls with another 20,000 El Pasoans, so everybody give yourself a pat on the back. That's almost 31,000 folks that participated in some way with this town hall meeting, and that's great for democracy. The town hall meeting concept we'll do again in the near future, and if you'd like, leave a voicemail for me once the call ends, and the Tele Town Hall meeting folks will give you instructions on how to do that, and in the next few days we'll answer your questions if you'll just leave us a voicemail, and we'll get back to you with answers to your questions that you leave for us. I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight, and just remember, you live in the best community in Texas. Thank you so much, and good night.